This is Bean to Barstool, a podcast that looks at the intersections of craft chocolate, craft beer, and other artisan drinks. My name is David Nilsson. I'm a professional drinks writer, an advanced cicerone, the author of Pairing Beer and Chocolate, and the creator and host of this show. The music for this episode is by my dear friend, indie folk musician Anna P.S. You can find out more about Anna's music in the show notes or on annapsmusic.com. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes as well. I hope you enjoy this episode of Bean to Barstool. Third Eye Brewing, led by brewmaster Kelly Montgomery, have been winning awards in a variety of categories on the regional, national, and international stages since they opened about half a decade ago. They've been recognized in styles as wide as Milk Stout, Scotch Ale, Pumpkin Ale, but they've won multiple awards for chocolate beers. They have a couple locations in towns on the north side of Cincinnati, Sharonville and Hamilton. And Kelly and I have been friends for years, and at the end of May, we decided to collaborate on an event at their Hamilton location that would just be a celebration of all things beer and chocolate. We called it Chocolate, Beer, and Chocolate Beer. Started out with a tasting of two of their chocolate Imperial Stouts, Dark Aura and Double Astral. We'll talk about those more in a little bit. And then we did a pairing of two non-chocolate beers they brewed with craft chocolate bars. I'll tell you more about those after the interview. A little bit ago, I sat down with Kelly to talk about how he brews with cacao, how his perspective on chocolate has changed from working with it in the brewing process, what he thought of the pairing when we got together in May, and just a little bit of how he looks at building recipes for adjunct beers, barrel-aged beers, all sorts of different stuff. One quick note before we jump into the interview. Kelly mentions IBUs a couple times, so I want to explain that real quickly for listeners who might not be familiar. IBU stands for International Bitterness Units. It's a technical measurement of the amount of isomerized hop alpha acids in a beer. What that means is that it is telling us roughly what the level of bitterness in the beer from the hops is going to be. It's not a number that I generally recommend consumers pay much attention to because the IBU number, first of all, can sometimes be inaccurate depending on how it was calculated, but also it's not the only thing that indicates to us what the perceived bitterness of a beer is going to be. Kelly in here is talking about needing to adjust his IBUs because of the presence of cacao, because the cacao is increasing the perception of bitterness. The scale goes roughly from 0 to about 100, 100 being very, very bitter. So when you're listening to the numbers that Kelly is giving here at a couple points, just kind of use that 0 to 100 scale as a rough understanding of how much hop bitterness he's looking for in these recipes, but not necessarily how that's going to come across in the finished beer. So here's Kelly Montgomery from Third Eye Brewing to talk all about brewing with cacao. Kelly, thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk all about your award-winning beers made with cacao. Before we jump into talking about those, before you were brewing with cacao, what was your awareness of good chocolate? Did you have any relationship to chocolate prior to this?
No, not really. I don't even know that I really realized there was anything other than, Milky Way Snickers out there. I don't think I really realized there was real chocolate, that even existed.
So let's talk about some of the beers that you've brewed with cacao. We're going to talk about these in a lot more detail, but we've got Double Astral, which is the Imperial Stout with cacao. That's kind of the classic format. Dark Aura, the Imperial Stout with cacao and peanut butter. I know you brewed the collaboration with River North. That was a black barley wine with cacao. Do you have some others in there that I'm missing?
We did, I guess it would have been a chocolate porter we did one for Christmas. It was high ABV porter with chocolate and then had some spices in it.
Well, let's go ahead and break down some of these individually then. Double Astral is probably your best known. I would say you've won both regional and national awards with that beer. Walk us through the basic format for what Double Astral is.
Double Astral, the base style of that beer is really just like a monstrous sweet stout. It comes in at 10.8%. So it's a monstrous beer. That's before it goes into any barrels. Base recipes similar to what a sweet stout would be.
Okay. So we've got lactose in there.
We have lactose in there. We make it super chewy. It's probably one of the thickest beers that we brew, that in Dark Aura, where it almost finishes where some beers start. So it's a super thick beer. We use some maltodextrin in it as well to just give it that body.
And despite this being a nationally award winning beer, it kind of started out as an accident of sorts. This format was not the original plan for this. Is that right?
Yeah, well, the first time that we brewed it, we'd kind of meant for it to be kind of what it is now. This is the first time we brewed it, instead of 10.8%, it was like a 6.5% beer. The original name was Astral, and then when we kind of messed up the 6% Astral, the next time we brewed it and we got it right, that just turned into the Double Astral, which was kind of what it was always meant to be. But yeah, we brewed it earlier on when we still didn't know our system very well. It was one of the, new first brews that we made on the new system. And we weren't sure how our mash tun was going to handle the massive amount of grain, and it did not perform well. So it took some trial and error to get to where it is now.
And single Astral has never made a reappearance. Is that right?
Single Astral has never made an appearance. It's never, probably never will make an appearance ever again. So
Sure. Well, Double Astral's pretty good. I think it can take the place of anybody looking for that. Let's break that beer down a little bit more than on the chocolate side. So you're brewing this massive lactose Imperial Stout. What cacao are you using in that beer?
So we started off, and it's still, other than the kind of changes we've done recently, but we've always used Maverick chocolate. And just kind of dumb luck, the very first time we made it, he happened to have the Haitian type of chocolate. So we've always used Maverick Haitian cocoa nibs up until very recently.
Yeah, and this most recent one you switched over to Violet Sky, right?
Yeah, so Maverick Chocolate, they're undergoing a big renovation, so they were unable to fill our order, and I believe I reached out to you to
Mhm.
find a new chocolate maker. So we were using Hans with, is it Violet Sky?
Yeah. Having tasted both of those since they're the same origin, were you able to notice any differences in the character between Maverick and Violet Sky?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The Violet Sky, I think it has more of a, I think it's got more of a deeper chocolate. It's got a really nice deep chocolate flavor. There's still some of that fruity elements that you get from the Haitian chocolate, but
Mhm.
I don't think it's quite as on the fruity side as the Maverick one. I really like both of them a lot. They're just kind of a little different.
Yeah, it's fun to be able to compare that so closely between them because usually you're making some bigger difference and just seeing all you're changing here is the nib. So it's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the process. How are you adding your nibs to beer?
So we're adding about 2 pounds per barrel of cocoa nibs, and we use pure cocoa nibs. We don't use the husk or any of those anymore. It's all just the cocoa nibs, and we're using them on the bright side. We're basically using them on the cold side of the process. After the beer is done fermented, we will load up the bright tank with the cocoa nibs. We'll put them into Muslim hop bags, and we'll have the vanilla, and we'll have the Muslim hop bags already in the bright tank, and then we'll transfer the beer right onto the cocoa nibs and vanilla.
And are you just at that point, are you just tasting at several points to see where it gets to where you want it, or do you have a set amount of time you're typically doing
Yeah, I
it?
think initially we were more just tasting it and then kegging it, canning it once we got it to where we need it to be. I think we've brewed that beer enough now that we know it's about 4 days in, we'll get all the chocolate flavor that we need. And now that we've kind of switched to the violet sky chocolate, it was about the same amount of time, but we were, doing a lot of tasting, making sure that it was the same time frame. Yeah, about 4 days is about all we need at that many pounds per barrel, 2 pounds per barrel.
What originally got you connected to Maverick? I know they're a Cincinnati maker, but how did you make that connection?
I had Taft's at one point, Taft's Brewing Company when they were around. I was at a bottle share and one of the Taft's brewer was there and they had made a chocolate porter, or they had made some sort of chocolate beer. And I just noticed right away that it wasn't the same type of chocolate that I had been using. It just was a lot brighter, just a lot more flavorful, a lot more aromatic. So I saw how good that beer was. It was really making me kind of want to brew a chocolate beer.
Sure. What made you select the Haiti origin in the first place?
In the first place, that was all that was available to me when the very first order I put in, that was basically the only thing that I could get. And, it worked well. So we just kind of kept going with that through the rest of it.
So you said with Double Astral, you're brewing this, very chewy, very thick-bodied Imperial Stout. What are you doing differently when you're designing a recipe, knowing that you're going to be adding something like cacao? You're not just brewing what you would brew if it were going to be a base Imperial Stout. I assume you're kind of adjusting to accommodate those ingredients you're going to add.
Yeah, we do have to do a lot of adjusting and accommodating for the cacao. One of the main things, we pick up a lot of kind of bitterness or astringency from the cacao. So I'll usually dial back the bitterness or the hops that I'm putting in. Normally on a big stout like this, I might be at 50 to 80 IBUs, and you barely taste any of that bitterness because there's all those other flavors to kind of balance it out. But you can't really do that when you're adding this level of cacao. You have to, I mean, we dial it back to 15, 20 IBUs. We have to dial it way back, or it's just the end product's too bitter. So that's something that we've been working on through the batches, is just trying to get that overall astringency and bitterness down to the lowest levels as possible. Kind of want it to be like smooth chocolate. So
Mm-hmm. Do you notice any difference in pH with adding the cacao nibs,
it does drop it slightly. It's kind of like when we're adding darker grains, we get a little pH drop.
but not enough to really have to adjust for it much?
Yeah, we don't really do a pH adjustment for the chocolate.
Okay, sure. So it sounds like the adjustments you're making are on the bittering side. You're not necessarily making any malt side recipe adjustments to prepare for those flavors.
Yeah, we so to try to mimic actual chocolate flavor, milk chocolate flavor, we can't just get there with the cacao. We kind of build up, or at least what people have in their heads is milk chocolate, like a Hershey's bar. We have to add, the lactose is perfect for that, where you get the milk sugar and the vanilla beans mixed with the cacao. That's what I think really gives it the chocolate flavor that you're used to. When you go in to get a Hershey's chocolate bar, it's kind of that. So we do have the lactose, vanilla with the cacao, I think is the perfect combination to mimic chocolate in a beer.
Are you selecting anything in particular on the vanilla side to get that right?
We generally will use just Madagascar, bourbon vanilla, beans. We'll usually soak them in some sort of vodka tincture, extract all the flavor, and then just let them soak in the beer. And this is one of our most expensive recipes between, the amount of chocolate, vanilla beans, vanilla, it's and the huge grain bill.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a crazy expensive beer to make.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's paid off. You've gotten on the national stage with this beer. I assume this is kind of a cult favorite for when you have it available.
Yeah, it's one of those things we used to only brew it once a year, and it's become almost a year-round beer. We usually seems like I'm brewing it every couple months now. It surprisingly sells really well, and even in the summer months and months you wouldn't think stouts would sell well. It's been kind of a year-round beer for us here lately.
Yeah, that is unusual, but that's cool to hear. So it's got this kind of sister beer in Dark Aura that's a similar format, but you're also brewing that with peanut butter. What was the concept there and what's different with that beer?
Yeah, so the concept for Dark Aura really came about. I mean, everybody likes Reese cups. I think probably one of my favorite candy bars is anything with chocolate and peanut butter. So we really wanted to kind of mimic, kind of a dessert style beer. This was really meant for barrel aging. Initially, actually, both these beers they were never really meant to be non-barrel aged. They were just so good non-barrel aged that we do a lot more than that than the actual barrel aging. But yeah, the getting back to the Dark Aura, we wanted to produce something that was almost just like a Reese's peanut butter cup. The base styles are similar, but they are different. That peanut butter covers up a ton of flavor. So you can make a little bit, you have to make a little bit more robust grain bill, just to power through that peanut butter. Chocolate's a strong flavor, but peanut butter just covers up everything. So
Yeah,
you can do a little bit more roasted, you can do more caramel, and you can do a lot more just stronger flavors with the peanut butter beer, and you have to you know keep it stout like and to kind of balance it out so the peanut butter just doesn't take over everything.
sure. With using chocolate as kind of a foundational flavor, there's obviously a lot of different dessert like concepts you could do. Do you have other ideas that you'd like to work with of, other flavor concepts, other dessert concepts to build onto a beer like this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's such a great base for either one of these beers of doing lots of different things with. We've done banana Foster's versions, and you get the peanut butter, you get the banana. We've done it both with Dark Horror and Double Astral. It seems to work well with banana flavors, maple syrup. We've done some maple syrup
Hmm.
variants that seem to work well with both those beers. Cinnamon. So there's some of the things that we've done that seem to work really well with those two beers.
Yeah, that's
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone. Gravel Road Brewing Company in downtown Middletown, Ohio, just south of Dayton, is brewing great beer and offering a full calendar of food trucks and fun events. Located in a former industrial building that's full of character, Gravel Road has a small, cozy bar space and a larger, family-friendly taproom area with a pool table and games. Head brewer Dan Loro is passionate about historical brewing traditions, so you'll often find styles like Munich Helles and Kentucky Common on tap. But yes, there's usually a hazy IPA too, if that's your preference. While you're there, you can say hello to Chicken Nugget, Gravel Road's resident brewery cat, who even has his own Instagram account. If you live in Cincinnati or the Miami Valley, or you're just passing through, head down to Gravel Road and check out this excellent brewery. And thanks to Gravel Road for sponsoring Final Gravity and Bean to Barstool. Sound good. Let's talk about the collab you did with River North. That's another award-winning brewery that has gotten a lot of recognition for their kind of high concept and big-bodied beers. The beer that you did with them was Celestial Death, which was a black barley wine with chocolate. First of all, explain black barley wine and then talk about the idea behind the collaboration.
Yeah, I think black barley wine, I don't think it's, an official style. There's not a category for black barley wine in most major competitions, but it is kind of a subcategory of barley wine, and it's just darker. If you look at it, it's not going to have amber color. It's going to be a lot more almost black. It's going to have a lot more roasted grain than a normal barley wine. Might get a little less of those caramel barley wine flavors and just get a little bit more of the darker roast flavors.
How is someone going to recognize the difference between that and a stout of a similar strength?
It still has kind of the dark fruit and it still has the caramel. And the roast is way less. I mean, the roast is it's very light-handed compared to a stout. I mean, it's almost for color almost.
Okay.
You get a little bit of roast, but it's not like a stout at all.
Almost like the black IPA concept where it's just a
Almost,
subtle
yeah,
accent. Sure.
exactly.
What made you guys settle on doing a black barley wine?
We were trying to, so I ran into the River North guys, the Mats, both Mats at the Rare Beer Fest in Denver last year. And I seem to run into them every year at some of these events, and it seems like we're always battling out in the same categories. You know, they're doing chocolate beers, they're doing barley wines, they're doing pumpkin beers, they're doing all just like I think we have 4 or 5 categories we're always battling out. Some years they win, some years we win. So it's been a fun kind of friendly competition. But we also thought it'd be great just to get together and brew a beer together and just kind of combine something that we're both good at. And that's kind of how the barley wine, chocolate barley wine came around. We do chocolate beers. I think we've both been on the stage for those, and we both love barley wine. So we just decided to combine the two things, and we went with the black barley wine style. We thought it would stand up a little bit better for the chocolate. We weren't sure if the regular style barley wine, how that chocolate was gonna, I don't know,
Sure.
kind of metal in with it. So the darker style we thought would just be a better way to represent the chocolate.
And was that brewed at their place or yours?
Yeah, that was brewed at their place. We just released it this past April for they do like a whole barley wine month, which is really cool. When I was there, they had 10 or so different barley wines on tap, 17 to
Wow.
23%. So
Yeah, those are some big beers. So the cacao in this one, what did you guys use, and was that added in the same way that you typically do?
yep, it was added in the same way. For that particular barley wine, we used Ghana cacao,
Hmm.
which wasn't as kind of fruit intensity as the Haitian. It was more of that classic chocolate flavor,
Hmm.
and it worked really well with it. And I think maybe in a competition, that classic kind of chocolate flavor might even actually be better. I think that fruit kind of, where it does add some complexity, it might not be the best for a beer being judged in that kind of competition.
Yeah, I think we're still working on the education component of people recognizing what flavors can happen in chocolate beyond just that base chocolate. And I think sometimes that gets rewarded, like the most richly chocolatey
Right.
flavor for sure. We talked about the origins you've used. You went with Haiti originally. That was what they had available. When you're tasting, whether it's evaluating cacao or tasting your beer to see if it's got the chocolate flavor you're looking for, do you have anything particular you are looking for, or is it just that most chocolatey flavor?
Primarily looking for, if it's being brewed for competition, we're looking for that chocolatey flavor. Yeah, it's the main thing we're going for. If we know that the beer is going to be going into a barrel, we might be looking for some different stuff because we know the flavor's got to punch through the barrel. So we might let it sit on the chocolate a few extra days. But for the most part, we're looking for that chocolate flavor. And depending on how we're going to actually use the beer, whether it's going to be barrel aged or if it's going to have adjuncts or if it's just going to be regular, we might do some other things to just kind of adapt to where the final beer is going to be.
So let's talk more about barrel aging. You mentioned that a couple times. I know you do barrel aged versions of both Double Astral and Dark Aura. Do you do anything when you're brewing a barrel aged batch to adjust for the fact that it's going to go into barrels?
We do. For the most part, if we know it's going into barrels, we like to actually add the chocolate after it's come out of the barrel. I think it's a more predictable process. We usually don't get enough. After it's been sitting in a beer in the barrel, it seems like it needs to be hit with more chocolate anyway. So I think it's better, and that way we can use fresh chocolate. We like to use it, as soon as it's been roasted, as soon as it comes out. So as soon as it comes out of the barrel, we'll kind of do the same process. We'll wait for it to come out of the barrel generally.
So does that you just move that from those barrels back into a bright tank and do the same thing you were
Yeah,
doing
well,
otherwise?
yeah, we'll generally process 3 or 4 bourbon barrels worth, and we'll transfer that back into the bright tank right on top of the cacao. Pretty much the same process.
So when you know you're going to put one of these chocolate beers into a barrel, are you doing anything particular from a barrel selection standpoint of the flavors you want out of that barrel?
Yes and no. It seems like barrels are just so unpredictable. Even if we have two exact bourbon barrels that were sitting right next to each other for many years, we're getting totally different flavors from each barrel, no matter how close they were or what kind of bourbon was in there. It's been kind of the unpredictable part of it. Some barrels that you think would be really good aren't, and the barrels, even like a lesser whiskey that you might not like to drink yourself, but sometimes that works the best for
Hmm.
something like a chocolate beer. So we'll usually put it in kind of a mixture of a lot of different barrels, and that part's kind of the mystery and kind of the fun.
So you're just blending those afterwards. You're not doing like single barrel releases or anything like that.
We do single barrels most of the time, though it's a blend.
So just on the stout side itself, on the base recipe before we get to the chocolate, is there anything you're adjusting from a malt selection standpoint to go into those barrels, whether it's the way malts are going to respond to oxidation or anything like that?
So yeah, for the barrel aged stuff, not necessarily on the malts. We can increase the hops a little bit. If we're shooting for 20, even though we're going for that lesser amount so we know we're going to get some from the chocolate. Those hops are going to fade after sitting a year in the barrel. So we do want to still make sure we get that 20 IBUs of base hops. We might actually, we're going to increase that amount after it's sit for a year and the hops have faded to still where we still have that 20 IBUs of bitterness when it gets out of the barrel.
Sure.
But as far as the grain selection, that's all. We don't really change that much. That's all pretty much the same.
Okay. So both of these or all of these beers that we've talked about so far are fairly familiar flavors for people when they're thinking about chocolate. Have you thought about any ideas for brewing beers with cacao with maybe more unexpected flavors or other concepts that you'd like to test out?
We've actually done with double Astral and actually Dark Aura. We brew a pretzel beer. It sounds, I don't know, I thought it sounded pretty terrible when I first heard of it, but it's kind of become a thing. Sometimes at festivals, we will have our pretzel beer on one side of the jockey box and double Astral Dark Aura on the other side. And we'll get a line a mile long, people wanting they call it the suicide or the mix or where they come in, get a little bit of the pretzel beer and mix it with the double Astral. We found that about 25% pretzel and 75% double Astral works really well. But
How are you getting pretzel flavor into the beer?
we were putting just tons and tons of actual pretzels in the beer. We were arranging the grain bill with rye and wheat and trying to make it as pretzely as possible. And then we eventually it was getting kind of crazy. I mean, it's our second best-selling beer now, so we're brewing it all the time. We found a flavor company that kind of made us a custom blend that we can use less actual pretzels and we can use more of this custom pretzel flavor that we had made for us.
That's fun. So how about we've talked about some of the fruity flavors that can come from cacao. Of course, cacao itself is a fruit, so there is a fruit pulp that has flavor. You guys do beyond these chocolate beers a whole range of styles, IPAs, milkshake IPAs, fruited sours, all sorts of things like that. Have you considered using either cacao nibs or pulp or anything like that in a different non-chocolatey format?
We haven't. That's a really interesting thing that I think you definitely could. I mean, there's definitely you do get a lot of fruit flavor from the cacao, and it doesn't really affect the color as much as you would think adding cacao into a beer would. So you could still have a lighter beer and have some of those fruit flavors. I don't know. I think it would still be chocolatey. So I don't know, or maybe there's a chocolate that you know of or somebody knows of that where it's a lot more fruit forward than maybe even the Haitian chocolate.
Well, here in Ohio, we've got so many of those pale coffee beers, things like Wolf's Ridge Daybreak and all the beers that have come behind it. I've always thought doing something similar with cacao nibs would be interesting, where you're just allowing that light, fresh nib flavor similar to the coffee in those beers come through. I'd love to see something like that. But I think there's even room. I mean, with something like a hazy pale ale or something like that to kind of use it as a contrast to that tropical fruit.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great idea. I think it'd be a lot of fun to play around with. I just see we regularly do a Kolsch where it's almost that coffee Kolsch thing, but you're doing it with chocolate to kind of get some of those same flavor combinations you would with a coffee Kolsch.
We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, you may have noticed things in the world aren't awesome right now, and social media kind of reflects that. I built a lot of the following for Bean to Barstool and just for my own writing career on Instagram, but I've been getting significantly lower returns in terms of engagement on Instagram, and well, some of their recent changes don't have me thrilled for the future. So, here are some ways to keep up with Bean to Barstool if Instagram and other social media platforms don't prove to be long-term viable solutions. If you do nothing else, sign up for the Bean to Barstool newsletter. You can do that by going to beantobarstool.com/newsletter-signup. That link is in the show notes. That is a weekly email newsletter that covers all the same things we cover here on the podcast. Speaking of, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Wherever you listen to Bean to Barstool, go there and subscribe to make sure you get notifications of new episodes. If you're a proud millennial like me and you still use an RSS feeder, you can also subscribe to our blog posts, which come out at least weekly. Also, if you are still on social media but don't love Meta right now, you can check me out over on Blue Sky. I'm on there under my personal account at David Nilsson Beer, but I do post all the Bean to Barstool content over there as well. Finally, if you want to get in touch with me directly, you can email beantobarstool@gmail.com. I am not leaving Instagram anytime soon, but these are great ways to make sure you can keep up with what I have going on. Stay safe and take care of each other. Yeah. That could be really interesting. So you mentioned at the beginning that you really didn't have much familiarity with craft chocolate before you started brewing with it. How has brewing with good cacao and making these chocolate beers changed how you taste chocolate now?
Yeah, it's just a whole new world. I think it's when we have a lot of customers that just first find out how many different flavors that come from hops and how many different, you're getting all these flavors from the yeast. And it's just one more thing that once you get down the rabbit hole, there's a million different flavors of each chocolate now. So it's one more thing to try to learn and master. And I think it's fun in beer that there's so many different ingredients and there's so many different. Just go down that rabbit hole and it's never ending. So there's always something new to learn. And with chocolate, it's no different for sure.
Well, you and I recently did this event together at your brewery where we were tasting your chocolate beers and then also pairing a couple non-chocolate beers with craft chocolate. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts were on the pairing side of that. I don't know if it's something you've done a lot, but we paired two of your beers with bars. What did you think of those flavor combinations?
Yeah, I think it really surprised me. I think it surprised a lot of the people at the event, just the types of beers that I don't think they're the first beers you think of when you think of something that would go good with chocolate. We paired it with sour beer, and it was great how much it kind of brought out some of those flavors of the chocolate. And then when we did the milkshake IPA with the pineapple and coconut, I thought it was really amazing. There's two styles of beer maybe you wouldn't think go good with chocolate, and that was just really interesting how it brought out and enhanced the chocolate flavor. So
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah, on that milkshake IPA, I know you guys have been excited about being able to develop your own toasted coconut where you're doing that in-house. Can you briefly touch on that a little?
Yeah, so we kind of fell in love with Narrow Path's coconut They have a coconut, award-winning coconut porter, and they hand toast the coconut. And so I've absolutely just loved their coconut. We haven't been able to duplicate it until recently, but Narrow Path and us, we would do our award-winning Milk Stout, and then we'd borrow coconut that they had hand toasted from them for a long time. We did that, and that was our Mounds of Importance beer. That's won some awards as well. But it was starting to be too much of a pain for them to, if we want to do a 60 barrel batch and have coconut, we need a lot of it. So we needed to kind of figure out a way that we weren't bothering them all the time to get us coconut. So we kind of learned how their process, and we have a kitchen here at Third Eye. So we were able to, I don't know, we ran about 10 different tests on our kitchen here, and we finally figured out basically how to get that flavor that we were getting from Narrow Path's coconut.
So are you hand shredding fresh coconut to do that?
We'll get organic shredded coconut, and then we're basically putting it on baking sheets. And we have an oven where you can put like 10 sheets in at a time, and we'll put it in. We have to kind of stir it, about halfway through. It starts getting toasted on one side, and then the other side doesn't get toasted. So about halfway through, we kind of stir it all up, get it all mixed together, and let it toast some more until we get that really nice light brown toasted color, and absolutely delicious. So
Yeah,
kind
for
of hooked
sure.
on it. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And then lastly, I know you haven't done this yet, but you had mentioned the possibility of wanting to work with one of these chocolate makers in the other direction of sending, whether it's sending the used nibs back after you brewed with them or just using one of your beers or something like that. Can you talk about some of those ideas you've had?
yeah, I just we spend so much money on these cocoa nibs, and we soak them in the beer for 4 days, and then we have just pounds and pounds of, cacao, and it just seems like a waste just to throw it away. So we were just thinking it'd be a great idea if a chocolate maker could take the cacao from the beer and turn that into chocolate, or if some baking companies wanted to that normally use this cacao could somehow incorporate this into a baked good. But I think it would make a fantastic candy bar, or any sort of, I don't know. I think it'd be a lot of fun for see how it comes out in some chocolate products.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if there are any chocolate makers or confectioners listening who think that sounds interesting, reach out to me and I'll get you in touch with Kelly to see if we can get that moving forward. Kelly, these beers are delicious. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David.
Double Astral and Dark Aura really are both just fantastic. Double Astral is kind of the platonic ideal of a chocolate stout. It is so richly chocolatey. It's very, very creamy. It's thick, but not stupidly thick, where you feel like you're drinking syrup like some beers can be. It still maintains its roast character in balance with the cacao itself. It's not sticky on the finish, even though it does have a sweet perception. You get a little bit of roast acidity. You get a little bit of fruitiness from the cacao, which honestly, even though Kelly was saying that maybe that is not judged as highly because they're looking for a classically kind of flat chocolate flavor, I think it adds a level of nuance that pushes this beer over the top for me. Double Astral is just amazing. Dark Aura with the peanut butter in it is really, really good. It tastes almost like a melted dark chocolate Buckeye, if you're familiar with Buckeye confections here in Ohio and in the Midwest. It is sweet and rich, really, really good. I mentioned those beers have won a ton of awards. Most notably, Double Astral won gold in the chocolate beer category at the Great American Beer Festival in 2023. So it was anointed as the best chocolate beer in the country. It is fantastic. If you get a chance to try either of those beers or the barrel-aged variants of those, they are all just great. Kelly talked about River North, who he collaborated with on the Celestial Death beer. They have also won a ton of awards for chocolate beers, coffee beers, barrel-aged beers. They brew these really high-gravity adjunct beers that are really, really interesting. They have a couple locations in Denver where they're centered, most notably in the River North neighborhood, which is kind of the nightlife district. There's a lot of brewery tap rooms and things like that. I have been out to Denver a ton of times for beer events. I've only actually been into one of their tap rooms once. Late one night, was walking around Rhino with my friend Anna, who does the music for the show. We had just left Bierstadt Lager House and ended up in River North, and we both had small glasses of one of their 15% ABV beers. It was a good way to end the evening. I have had several of their beers at GABF itself and at the Denver Rare Beer Tasting. Always good. They are using cacao from Cho, or at least historically they have used Cho's cacao. I know they've used a couple different origins, I think Ghana and Ecuador most recently, but they're also very worth checking out if you get the chance. On the pairings that we did in May, so we did 2 different pairings at the chocolate and beer event, and they were both styles. I wanted to use beers that attendees were maybe not going to think of as being chocolate pairing beers. I kind of wanted to surprise them. So we went with a fruited sour and a fruited milkshake IPA. The sour was Funky Fresh version 9. As that indicates, they do a bunch of different versions of this basic format. So this is a tart, fairly dry, light-bodied sour that is brewed with passion fruit, prickly pear, and pineapple. So it is fruity and bright, but still dry and crisp on the finish. Only 4% alcohol. I paired that with Theo and Philo's 65% dark bar with green mango and sea salt out of the Philippines. One of my favorite bars for professional pairings. I use it often with fruited sours, and it really was excellent here. The salt does a really good job of bouncing off of that low alcohol and that tartness to kind of give it a little bit of a margarita-like character. And then the acidity of the beer kind of breathes life back into the mango in the bar. Just a really, really fun pairing. My favorite pairing of the 2, though, was the second one, the Milkshake IPA Jelly Brain. This is version 1 of Jelly Brain. They do a bunch of different versions of this, but it is a milkshake IPA, 7.2% alcohol, brewed with lactose and vanilla. Those are kind of the hallmarks of what makes a milkshake IPA. Uses Centennial hops for a little bit of a citrusy hop backbone, but the main flavor drivers are real pineapple and coconut that they toast in-house. That was the coconut Kelly was talking about there toward the end of the interview. So this is really tropical, really bright and creamy, but without being overly sweet. If you've ever had a milkshake IPA that was too cloyingly sweet, this avoids those pitfalls. I paired this with Definite Chocolate's Dominican Rum Bar. They are a Dominican Republic maker, and this is a dark chocolate bar that uses cacao that's been infused with rum. This bar is unique among a lot of spirits bars in that it isn't all that aggressively spirituous. It's not like you taste it right away and can tell that there is a high proof spirit in here. A lot of makers, when they're working with rum or whiskey or whatever spirit it might be, they want that to shine through. They want people to taste that right away. The rum in here is definitely much more subtle. It is an accent to the cacao. What was really fun pairing that with this IPA that has a little bit elevated ABV, 7.2%, is that the alcohol in the beer pulled that rum character forward, pulled forward a little bit of oakiness and a little bit of spirituous character from the rum that provided this great third component to kind of fill out the pina colada concept of the beer. So it really tasted like an actual alcoholic pina colada. Just a really fascinating pairing and definitely my favorite of the 2. After the tasting and pairing itself, Kelly led a group of attendees on a short tour of the brewery and then downstairs into the basement of the brewery. So it's in an old, what used to be a Pepsi bottling plant. was sat empty for a long time before they took it over. So down in the basement, you've got, it's just like bare concrete, and they use it for storage mostly, but there is a small room off to the side that is their barrel room, and they've got, barrels of their different beers that are aging in different spirits barrels stacked in there. And it is such a cool space. Like, it's very rustic and kind of rough, but there's these, amazing award-winning beers resting in barrels from very storied, well-known distilleries in there. And Kelly and I are talking about the possibility of maybe doing some kind of special tasting event just down there in the barrel room. We haven't decided on anything yet. I'm not positive it's going to happen, but it will be so cool if we can pull that off. So definitely keep an eye on my social media, or sign up for my newsletter to be alerted to any events like that if they do come up, if you're in the Southwest Ohio area. If you love Bean to Barstool, if you enjoyed this episode or others that we've done, you can help more people discover the show by leaving a review on your favorite podcast service. I will be very grateful to you for doing that. Also, as always, check out our online shop at beantobarstool.com to pick up a copy of Pairing Beer and Chocolate, as well as a bunch of other cool beer and chocolate zines, including the latest issue of Final Gravity, our quarterly beer zine telling personal, human-centered stories about beer. Thanks to Kelly for coming on the show today. Thanks to all of you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Bean to Barstool.